Midnight on New Year's Eve, a time when the world comes alive with celebration. Fireworks light the skies, glasses clink in toasts, and resolutions are made. But what if I told you this festive night holds a much darker history? Across the world, the New Year has been a moment of mystery. A time when ancient rituals, chilling superstitions, and eerie legends come to life. From ghostly visitors to cursed disappearances, this is the hidden, haunting side of New Year's Eve that few dare to speak of. Tonight, we'll uncover 5 eerie traditions and dark tales that might just change the way you see the turning of the year. So, as the clock strikes midnight, ask yourself, are you ready to step into the unknown? In Scotland, New Year's Eve, known as Hogmanay, is more than just a time for celebration. It's steeped in superstition and ancient rituals. At the heart of these traditions is the custom of first footing. This belief dictates that the first person to cross your threshold, after the stroke of midnight, holds the power to determine your fortune for the entire year ahead. But it's not just any visitor who can bring good luck. The ideal first footer is a dark-haired man bearing symbolic gifts. Coal to ensure warmth, bread to guarantee food, and whiskey to promise good cheer. Blonde or red-haired visitors, however, were thought to bring bad luck. This superstition likely dates back to Scotland's history with Viking invaders, who were often fair-haired and brought destruction wherever they landed. Over time, this fear transformed into a belief that light-haired visitors were harbingers of misfortune. This tradition became so deeply ingrained in Scottish culture that families would carefully plan their first visitor. Some even went so far as to arrange for trusted friends or neighbors to visit after midnight to ensure their luck was secured. In the 19th century, hiring strangers to act as first footers became a common practice in larger towns, with men earning money for their dark hair and willingness to carry the symbolic gifts. But the stakes of first footing were more than just symbolic. In rural communities, where superstitions held great power, being the wrong type of visitor could have serious consequences. Stories were told of families who believed they had been cursed after a light-haired neighbor entered their home uninvited. These tales spread fear and reinforced the importance of following the tradition to the letter. One chilling tale tells of a man named Alistair MacDougall from a small Highland village in the early 1800s. Known for his skepticism of local customs, Alistair openly mocked the first footing tradition. On Hogmanay, he refused to invite anyone into his home after midnight, laughing at the idea that a visitor could bring him luck. But in the days that followed, his livestock began to fall ill one by one, and his fields were struck by an unusual frost, ruining his crops. As the weeks went on, whispers began to spread that Alistair's defiance had angered the spirits of Hogmanay. He claimed to hear faint knocks at his door every night, accompanied by whispers in the wind. The following Hogmanay, his house was found abandoned, and Alistair was never seen again. The story of Alistair MacDougall became a cautionary tale, warning others to respect the traditions of first footing, or risk inviting the wrath of the unknown. While the fear of bad luck may not hold as much weight today, first footing remains a beloved tradition in Scotland. Many still honor the custom by inviting friends or neighbors as their first visitors, ensuring they bring symbolic gifts. For others, it's a fun nod to the past, a way to connect with their heritage. But in some rural parts of Scotland, whispers of the old superstitions still linger. Families recall stories passed down through generations, tales of bad luck that followed those who ignored the ritual. For some, the tradition isn't just about celebration. It's a way to keep the spirits of Hogmanay at bay. First footing reminds us of the delicate balance between joy and fear that defines so many New Year's traditions. It's a ritual that speaks to humanity's deep-rooted desire to control the unknown and protect against unseen forces. But what other ancient rituals carried such high stakes? To find out, let's journey back to ancient Rome and uncover the sacrifices made in the name of fortune. For the Romans, New Year's Day wasn't just a time for feasting and celebration. It was a deeply sacred occasion. It marked the Calends of January, a day dedicated to Janus, the two-faced god of beginnings and transitions. With one face looking to the past and the other to the future, Janus symbolized the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. But Janus wasn't a god to be taken lightly. To secure his favor, the Romans performed elaborate ceremonies and sacrifices. Goats, bulls, and even symbolic human effigies were offered at grand temples to ensure prosperity, protection, and good fortune for the coming year. These offerings weren't just acts of devotion, they were seen as essential safeguards against divine wrath. The significance of these sacrifices wasn't limited to religion. They were deeply intertwined with the politics and social order of ancient Rome. For the wealthy elite, these rituals were grand displays of piety, with entire households attending ceremonies and priests chanting prayers to Janus. Lavish sacrifices were made, often accompanied by festivals and banquets to showcase their devotion. But for the poor, the stakes were far higher. Failing to make an offering was seen as inviting disaster, not just for the individual, but for their entire community. Bad harvests, plagues, and natural disasters were often attributed to neglected sacrifices. This fear wasn't unfounded. Roman leaders, aware of the power of superstition, used these rituals to maintain control, framing them as tests of loyalty to the gods, and by extension, to Rome itself. On the morning of the Kalends, the high priest would lead a procession through the city, carrying sacred objects to the temple of Janus. Farmers would bring their best livestock, dressed in ceremonial garlands, to the altar. The sacrifices themselves were elaborate. After prayers and chants, the animals were slaughtered, and their blood was poured onto the altar as an offering. But these ceremonies were more than just displays of devotion. They were symbolic acts meant to cleanse the city and its people of past sins. The entrails of the animals were studied by priests, who interpreted their appearance as omens for the year ahead. A healthy sacrifice was seen as a sign of prosperity, while imperfections were taken as warnings of misfortune. One of the most chilling tales associated with Janus dates back to 27 BCE, during the reign of Emperor Augustus. A farmer named Marcus Calvus, who lived on the outskirts of Rome, was known for his disdain for tradition. On the Kalends of January, he refused to offer a goat, dismissing the ritual as unnecessary. According to the legend, that night, Marcus awoke to the sound of whispers outside his home. When he opened his door, he saw a figure with two faces, one staring directly at him, the other gazing into the distance. Terrified, Marcus retreated inside, but by dawn, his fields were covered in frost, and his livestock lay dead. Over the next few weeks, Marcus became a recluse, haunted by visions of Janus. One night, he vanished without a trace. His neighbors claimed to hear his voice carried on the wind, begging for forgiveness. Today, the story of Marcus Calvus serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of neglecting tradition. But beyond the fear and superstition, the rituals of ancient Rome reveal something universal, a deep human desire to control the uncertainty of the future. For the Romans, sacrifice was a way to align their lives with the will of the gods, ensuring harmony and prosperity for the year ahead. For the Romans, the new year wasn't just a celebration. It was a negotiation with the divine, balancing hope and fear. Their offerings to Janus symbolize humanity's age-old struggle to find meaning and security in the face of the unknown. But in Japan, the new year takes on a very different form, one of cleansing and spiritual renewal. In Japan, New Year's Eve is more than just a celebration. It's a time of profound spiritual renewal, known as Joya no Kane. This ancient Buddhist ritual takes place in temples across the country, where monks ring an enormous bronze bell exactly 108 times. But why 108? According to Buddhist teachings, this number represents the 108 earthly desires or defilements that weigh on the human soul. Emotions like greed, anger, jealousy, and pride. With each chime, one of these desires is symbolically purged, bringing participants closer to enlightenment. The final bell strikes at the stroke of midnight, marking not just the start of a new year, but the cleansing of the past. It's a moment of stillness and reflection, a bridge between what was and what lies ahead. The tradition of Joya no Kane dates back centuries, rooted in Japan's deep Buddhist heritage. During the Edo period, this ritual became a widespread practice, emphasizing the importance of starting the new year with a pure heart and mind. But Joya no Kane isn't just a spiritual exercise, it's a communal event. Families gather at temples, often braving freezing temperatures, to participate in the ritual. The bell, or bansho, itself holds symbolic significance. Its massive size and deep, resonant tone are believed to carry the prayers of the people, reaching both the heavens and the earth. Over time, the ceremony has evolved, but its essence remains unchanged. The rhythmic chimes serve as a reminder of humanity's struggles and the possibility of renewal. There's a fascinating belief tied to Joya no Kane, that if you fail to hear all 108 chimes, your unpurged desires may follow you into the new year. This superstition has led to moments of quiet panic among attendees who fear missing a single strike of the bell. For some, the chimes are more than symbolic. They carry real spiritual weight. Monks often pause between rings, allowing the sound to reverberate and fade into the night before striking again. This deliberate rhythm ensures that each chime is heard, giving participants the opportunity to reflect on their own lives and let go of the burdens they carry. One of the most enduring stories associated with Joya no Kane comes from the Meiji era. In a small village in northern Japan, a merchant named Takashi Kobayashi mocked the ritual, dismissing it as a meaningless tradition. During the ceremony, he grew impatient and left after only 50 chimes, loudly proclaiming that he had no need for such superstitions. But in the months that followed, Takashi's fortunes took a dark turn. His once thriving business crumbled, and a series of unexplained illnesses plagued his household. Villagers began to whisper that Takashi's refusal to honor all 108 chimes had left him vulnerable to the desires he failed to purge. On the next New Year's Eve, he returned to the temple in desperation, but the damage had already been done. His story became a cautionary tale, passed down through generations as a warning about the power of the bells. Today, Joya no Kane continues to hold a special place in Japanese culture. Even as modern life becomes more fast-paced, many still make time to visit their local temple on New Year's Eve, seeking a moment of peace and renewal. In some urban temples, the ceremony has been adapted to accommodate larger crowds, with participants taking turns ringing the bell themselves. This act allows individuals to physically engage with the ritual, making their cleansing even more personal. But in smaller, more traditional temples, the ceremony remains much as it has for centuries, a solemn reminder of the human struggle for enlightenment and the hope for a better year ahead. Even today, the rhythmic chimes of Joya no Kane echo through Japanese temples, their deep tones resonating across time and space. This timeless ritual reminds us of the enduring belief in cleansing the soul. But what happens when the spirits of the past refuse to be silenced? In Eastern Europe, Sylvester Night holds the answer. In parts of Eastern Europe, New Year's Eve isn't just a time for celebration. It's known as Sylvester Night, a night steeped in ghostly lore and eerie superstition. On this night, according to ancient belief, the boundary between the living and the dead is at its weakest, allowing spirits to wander freely among us. These restless souls are said to roam the earth, seeking to resolve unfinished business or deliver warnings to the living. While some see their presence as a chance for closure, others regard them with fear, believing these spirits to be omens of misfortune. The origins of Sylvester Night's ghostly associations can be traced back to pagan traditions, where the transition from the old year to the new was seen as a time of great spiritual significance. In pre-Christian times, many Eastern European communities believed that the dead held sway over this liminal period, their presence guiding the fate of the living in the year ahead. With the rise of Christianity, these beliefs evolved but did not disappear. Instead, they blended with Christian practices, creating a unique set of rituals meant to protect against the wandering dead. Families lit candles in their windows to guide lost souls back to their graves and left offerings of bread or wine at crossroads to appease the spirits. In some regions, church bells were rung throughout the night to ward off malevolent entities. On Sylvester Night, traveling after sunset was strictly avoided for fear of encountering a ghostly apparition. It was believed that the spirits of those who died violently or without proper burial were particularly active, drawn to places of human activity. Families would gather indoors, reciting prayers and clutching protective charms, such as crosses or amulets inscribed with sacred symbols. Some even spread ashes or salt at their doorsteps, believing these substances would prevent spirits from crossing the threshold. In Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia, it was customary to place a candle in every window, each representing a family member. If a candle flickered or went out, it was seen as an ominous sign that the spirit of that person might be in danger in the coming year. One of the most unsettling tales of Sylvester Night comes from a small village in modern-day Romania in the 19th century. A widow named Elena Giore had recently lost her husband, Ion, under mysterious circumstances. On New Year's Eve, as she prepared for bed, she heard a soft knock at her door. When she opened it, she saw Ion standing silently on the threshold, his expression blank and his clothes untouched by the snow falling around him. He didn't speak or move, and when she tried to approach him, he vanished into the darkness. The next morning, Elna's house was consumed by a mysterious fire that started with no apparent cause. She barely escaped with her life. The villagers believed Ion's spirit had returned to warn her of the danger, fulfilling unfinished business before finally passing on. While the fear of restless spirits has waned in modern times, many of the rituals of Sylvester Night persist. Families continue to light candles and gather in prayer, not out of fear, but as a way to honor their ancestors and maintain a sense of connection to the past. In rural areas, the old stories are still told, passed down through generations as cautionary tales. For some, the ghosts of Sylvester Night are more than just folklore. They are a reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead. Sylvester Night blurs the line between the living and the dead, leaving us to wonder, what other secrets might the New Year's Eve veil be hiding? For some, the answer lies in the chilling tales of those who vanished when the clock struck midnight. While most celebrate New Year's Eve with joy and anticipation, for some families, the night is marked by heartbreak and tragedy. Over the years, New Year's Eve has witnessed its share of eerie disappearances, cases that remain shrouded in mystery, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and fading hope. One of the most infamous disappearances tied to New Year's Eve is that of the Grimes sisters. Barbara, 15, and Patricia, 12, left their Chicago home on the evening of December 28, 1956, to watch an Elvis Presley movie at a nearby theater. They never returned. Despite an extensive search involving hundreds of volunteers and law enforcement, the sisters' bodies were discovered on January 22, 1957, along a desolate stretch of road in a snow-covered field. The autopsy results were inconclusive, with some evidence pointing to exposure as the cause of death, while others suspected foul play. Theories ranged from an accidental death to a targeted abduction, but the truth remains elusive. To this day, the case is considered one of Chicago's most haunting unsolved mysteries, and for the Grimes family, New Year's Eve became a reminder of a night when joy turned to sorrow. Another chilling case, although more recent, involves Lars Mittank, a 28-year-old German man who disappeared in Bulgaria. While his disappearance occurred in July, theories about his case connected to strange behaviors and heightened paranoia during liminal times. Moments like New Year's Eve. Lars was last seen running into the woods near an airport, seemingly fleeing from an unknown threat. Some believe that cases like Lars's share eerie similarities with New Year's Eve disappearances, heightened emotions, altered states, and the feeling of being chased by something unseen. Disappearances on New Year's Eve aren't confined to cities. In 1983, a group of hikers in Austria vanished while trekking near the snow-covered Alps. They had been celebrating New Year's Eve in a remote cabin and left to explore the surrounding area after midnight. When search teams arrived days later, they found no trace of the group, only their footprints in the snow, abruptly ending near the edge of a frozen lake. Some locals speculated that they fell through thin ice, while others whispered of supernatural forces at play. Stories of ghostly lights and unexplainable sounds in the area fueled theories of something far more sinister. In Russia, stories circulate about people who vanished during the celebrations of Novi God, the Russian New Year. One particularly haunting tale involves a man named Dmitry from a small Siberian village in 1972. After drinking with friends, Dmitry stepped outside to smoke and never returned. His body was never found, but some claimed to see his shadow walking toward the frozen tundra in the days that followed, always vanishing before they could reach him. In Japan, a similar tale from the 1930s recounts a young woman who disappeared during a New Year's Eve temple visit. Witnesses reported seeing her speaking to an older man in traditional robes. But when they approached, both figures had disappeared into the mist. These disappearances often occur in liminal spaces, forests, crossroads, or remote locations, places long believed to be thresholds between worlds. The transition from one year to the next is itself a liminal moment, a symbolic crossing between the past and the future. Some cultures believe that during this time, the veil between realms grows thin, making it easier for people to be taken, whether by spirits, forces of nature, or something we cannot explain. For the families of those who disappear, the new year becomes a painful reminder of what was lost, a moment frozen in time. Are these tragedies mere coincidences, or is there something about New Year's Eve, a night of transition and reflection that draws people to the unknown? Perhaps it's the allure of the liminal, the unseen forces we don't fully understand, or simply the chaos of a night meant for celebration. Whatever the cause, these disappearances serve as haunting reminders of how fragile the line is between joy and sorrow. These disappearances are not just tales of loss, they are warnings, reminders of how even the brightest celebrations can carry shadows. As we look forward to a new year, these stories remind us that some mysteries remain unsolved, their answers hidden in the places we dare not look. As the clock strikes midnight and the new year begins, these stories remind us that the turning of the year is more than just celebration. It's a moment steeped in mystery, where the boundaries between the past and the future, the living and the dead, seem to blur. From the ominous rituals of first footing in Scotland and the sacred sacrifices to Janus in ancient Rome, to the rhythmic chimes of Joya no Kane in Japan and the ghostly apparitions of Sylvester Night in Eastern Europe, each tradition speaks to humanity's timeless need to make sense of the unknown. But what of those who vanished, whose fates remain unwritten? The hikers in the Alps, the sisters in Chicago, and the many others whose New Year's stories were never completed. These tales haunt us, a chilling reminder of how fragile the line is between hope and fear. Whether these mysteries are born of ancient superstitions, natural chaos, or something far more otherworldly, one thing is certain: New Year's Eve carries a magic all its own, a magic both wondrous and unsettling. So as you welcome the new year, light your candles, ring your bells, and step forward with hope. But don't forget the lessons of these tales. Which of these stories resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments and share your own mysterious New Year's traditions. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with others who love diving into the mysteries of our world. Happy New Year, and may the coming days bring answers to the questions that linger in the shadows.